Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The sizzle of vegetables hitting the hot pan filled the kitchen with a savory aroma. Delicate fingers, adorned with chipped red nail polish, deftly maneuvered a wooden spoon through the colorful medley. The figure standing at the stove wore a floral apron over a knee-length dress, swaying slightly to an imaginary melody. A key turned in the front door lock. The cook froze, wide-eyed, as footsteps approached down the hall. "Mom, I'm home early. My last period got canceled and—" 14-year-old Sarah halted in the kitchen doorway, her backpack slipping from her shoulder to hit the floor with a thud. Her jaw went slack as she took in the scene before her. The person at the stove slowly turned, revealing not Sarah's mother, but her father, Tim, decked out in full feminine attire, from the floral house dress to the sensible low heels. For a long moment, the only sound was the sizzle of vegetables in the pan. Tim cleared his throat. "Sarah, honey, you're home early." Sarah's eyes darted around wildly, as if searching for an explanation that made sense. "Dad, what are you doing?" Tim's cheeks flushed crimson. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, struggling to find words. I was just... Why are you wearing Mom's clothes?" Sarah's voice rose an octave. Tim winced. He fumbled to turn off the stove, nearly knocking over a jar of utensils in the process. "It's complicated, sweetheart. I can explain." Sarah took a step back. "Is this some kind of joke? Where's Mom?"
"Your mother's still at work. She won't be home for a few hours." Tim wrung his hands, smearing sauce on the frilly apron. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Find out what?" Sarah's voice trembled. "Dad, you're scaring me!" Tim took a deep breath. "I know this must be confusing for you. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. He trailed off, searching for the right words. Sarah shook her head. "I don't understand." "Neither did I, for the longest time," Tim said softly. He gestured to an empty chair at the kitchen table. "Maybe we should sit down. I'll try to explain." Sarah hesitated, eyeing her father warily. After a moment, she slowly made her way to the table and perched on the edge of a chair. Tim eased into the seat across from her, wincing as the dress bunched awkwardly. He smoothed it self-consciously, then folded his hands on the table. "Sarah, do you remember when we talked about how some people feel like they were born in the wrong body?" Sarah nodded cautiously. "Like transgender people?" "That's right." Tim's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Well, I've always felt different, like I was meant to be someone else." Sarah's brow furrowed. "You mean like a woman?" Tim nodded, his eyes glistening. "For as long as I can remember, I've felt more comfortable in traditionally feminine roles. Cooking, cleaning, nurturing. And yes, even dressing this way." He gestured to his outfit. "It feels right to me in a way I can't fully explain." Sarah's face cycled through a range of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, hurt. "But you're my dad. You've always been my dad." "I'll always be your parent, sweetheart. That won't change." Tim reached across the table, but Sarah pulled her hands back. He let his own drop to his lap. "I know this is a lot to take in. Does Mom know?" Tim nodded. "We've been talking about it for a while now, trying to figure out how to tell you kids." Sarah's eyes widened. "Kids? You mean Jake knows too?" "Not yet. We were planning to sit you both down this weekend." Tim sighed. "I guess the cat's out of the bag now, at least for you." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. I need some time to think." "Of course, honey. Take all the time you need." Tim's voice cracked. "I love you, Sarah. That will never change." Sarah grabbed her backpack and fled the kitchen without another word.
A moment later, her bedroom door slammed shut upstairs. Tim slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. The vegetables in the pan had long since gone cold, forgotten in the tumultuous revelation. Hours passed in a haze of anxiety. Tim paced the kitchen, alternating between wringing his hands and obsessively wiping down already clean counters. He changed back into his usual attire, but it felt wrong, constrictive. The sound of a key in the lock made him jump. His wife, Linda, called out as she entered. "I'm home. Something smells good. Did you cook?" She appeared in the doorway, her smile fading as she took in Tim's disheveled appearance and haunted expression. What happened? Tim's lower lip trembled. Sarah came home early. She saw me. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh no! How did she react?"
"Not well," Tim said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She ran to her room. Hasn't come out since." Linda set down her purse and moved to embrace her husband. Tim melted into her arms, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "It'll be okay," Linda murmured, stroking his hair. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. We'll get through it together." Tim nodded against her shoulder. I never wanted to hurt them, to make them feel like their whole lives have been a lie." Linda pulled back, cupping Tim's face in her hands. "Listen to me. You have been an amazing father. Nothing about that was a lie. This is just a new chapter. It doesn't erase everything that came before." Tim managed a wan smile. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You're you," Linda said simply. "That's always been enough for me." A floorboard creaked overhead. They both looked up, then exchanged a worried glance. "Should I go talk to her?" Linda asked. Tim shook his head. "No, I think I need to do this." Linda squeezed his hand. "Okay, I'll be right here if you need me." Tim took a deep breath and made his way upstairs. He paused outside Sarah's door, hand hovering over the knob. After a moment's hesitation, he knocked softly. "Sarah, can I come in?" Silence stretched for so long that Tim wondered if she'd fallen asleep. Just as he was about to turn away, a muffled voice responded. "Okay." Tim eased the door open. Sarah sat cross-legged on her bed, hugging a pillow to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her cheeks tear-stained. "Hey, kiddo," Tim said softly. "Mind if I sit?" Sarah shrugged. Tim perched gingerly on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry you had to find out like that," he began. "It wasn't fair to you." Sarah picked at a loose thread on her pillowcase. "How long have you known?" Tim sighed. "In some ways, my whole life, but I didn't have the words for it until much later. I've been struggling with these feelings for years. Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "I was scared," Tim admitted. "Scared of how it would affect you and Jake. Scared of losing my family." Sarah's lower lip trembled. "But you're still our dad, right?" "You're not going to leave us?" "Oh, sweetheart, no." Tim moved closer, relieved when Sarah didn't pull away. "I will always, always be here for you. Nothing could ever change that." Sarah's resolve crumbled. She launched herself into Tim's arms, sobbing against his chest. Tim held her tight, his own tears falling freely. "I love you, Dad," Sarah hiccuped. "Even if I don't understand everything yet. I love you too, sweetie. So much." Tim pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We'll figure this out together, okay?" Sarah nodded, her breathing slowly evening out. They sat like that for a long while, the weight of secrets and fear lifting with each passing moment. Eventually, Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "So, what do I call you now?" Tim smiled softly. "For now, Dad is still fine. We can talk about it more as things progress." "Okay." Sarah nodded. "Okay." She hesitated,
then asked, "Can I see? The clothes, I mean. If that's not weird."
"It's not weird at all," Tim assured her.
"Are you sure you're ready?"
Sarah took a deep breath.
"I think so. It might help me understand better."
"All right then." Tim stood, offering his hand. "Let's go downstairs. Your mom will want to know you're okay too." Hand in hand, they made their way back to the kitchen. Linda looked up from where she'd been anxiously stirring a pot on the stove. Her eyes softened as she took in their linked hands. "Everything okay?" Sarah nodded. "I think so. It's a lot. But we're working on it." Linda smiled, reaching out to squeeze Sarah's shoulder.
"That's all we can ask for, honey."
Tim cleared his throat. Sarah was wondering if she could see, well, the real me. Linda's eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" Sarah nodded again, more firmly this time.
"All right then,"
Linda said. She turned to Tim.
"Go ahead, sweetheart. We'll be right here."
Tim disappeared upstairs. Sarah fidgeted nervously, and Linda drew her into a hug. "I'm proud of you," she murmured. "I know this isn't easy." Sarah relaxed into her mother's embrace.
"How did you handle it? When Dad first told you?"
Linda chuckled softly.
"Oh, I was a mess at first. Angry, confused, scared. But the more we talked, the more I realized that Tim was still the same person I fell in love with. Just
finally able to be their true self. Footsteps on the stairs made them both look up. Tim appeared in the doorway, once again dressed in the floral house dress and apron. This time, though, the makeup was freshly applied and a short auburn wig framed his face. Sarah's eyes widened. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "You look nice." Tim's face lit up with a tentative smile. "Yeah?" Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at her own lips.
"Yeah,
the dress suits you." Tim's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." Linda clapped her hands together. "Well, now that we're all here, why don't we finish making dinner together? As a family." And so they did. It was awkward at first. Sarah kept stealing glances at Tim, clearly still processing. But as they chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, the familiar rhythm of cooking together took over. By the time they sat down to eat, the tension had eased considerably. They talked about Sarah's day at school, Linda's work project, and Tim's latest attempt at baking bread. It wasn't quite normal, but it was a start. As Sarah helped clear the table, she paused. "Dad, I have a question." Tim looked up from where he was loading the dishwasher. "What is it, honey? Are you going to dress like this all the time now?" Tim exchanged a glance with Linda before answering. "We're still figuring that out. For now, it might just be at home. But eventually, yes, I'd like to." Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay, I think I can get used to that." Tim's smile was radiant. "Thank you, Sarah. Your support means everything to me." As the days turned into weeks, a new normal began to take shape in the household. Tim spent more and more time presenting as female, gradually growing more confident in his new role. Sarah watched with a mix of curiosity and lingering uncertainty as her father took on traditionally feminine tasks with increasing enthusiasm. She came home from school one day to find Tim elbow-deep in sudsy water, scrubbing the kitchen floor with gusto. "Hey, Dad!" she called, dropping her backpack by the door. "What's gotten into you?" Tim looked up, beaming. She, Sarah corrected mentally, wore a bandana tied around her short wig and had somehow managed to get soap suds on her nose. "Just giving this old floor a good scrubbing," Tim replied cheerfully. "I never realized how therapeutic cleaning could be." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Therapeutic? You used to hate cleaning." Tim sat back on her heels, considering. "I suppose I did, but
Now, I don't know. It feels different, like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do.
Sarah plopped down in a kitchen chair, careful to keep her feet clear of the wet floor. And that's being a housewife? Tim's cheeks flushed. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds a bit silly, but yes, I suppose so. Taking care of the home, nurturing the family. It just feels right. Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching as Tim resumed scrubbing. Finally, she asked, "Are you happier now?" Tim paused, looking up at her daughter with shining eyes. "I am, sweetheart. More than I ever thought possible." Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Then I'm happy for you, Dad." The front door opened, and Linda's voice called out, "I'm home! Something smells amazing in here!" Tim scrambled to her feet, nearly slipping on the wet floor. "Oh, I almost forgot about dinner." She hurried to the oven, pulling out a perfectly golden lasagna. Linda appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with an amused smile. "Well, look at you two domestic goddesses," she teased. Tim stuck out her tongue playfully. "I'll have you know I'm a domestic goddess in training. Thank you very much." Sarah rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "I'm just an innocent bystander." Linda laughed, moving to kiss Tim on the cheek. "Well, whatever you are, it smells delicious. Let's eat." As they settled around the table, Sarah couldn't help but notice how much more relaxed everyone seemed. The tension that had always simmered just beneath the surface of family dinners was gone, replaced by easy laughter and genuine smiles. Later that night, as Sarah was getting ready for bed, she heard a soft knock at her door. "Come in," she called. Tim poked his head in, still wearing the floral nightgown that had become his preferred sleepwear. "Hey, kiddo. Just wanted to say goodnight." Sarah patted the edge of her bed. "Come sit for a sec?" Tim settled beside her, smoothing the nightgown self-consciously. "What's on your mind?" Sarah fiddled with a loose thread on her comforter. "I was just thinking about how different things are now, but also how they're kind of the same." Tim tilted his head, encouraging her to continue. "I mean," Sarah struggled to find the right words, "you're still you. You're still my dad. But you're so much happier now. More yourself." Tim's eyes welled with tears. "Oh, sweetie, that means so much to hear you say that." Sarah leaned into Tim's side. "I'm sorry if I made things hard at first. I was just scared." "You have nothing to apologize for," Tim said firmly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "This is a big change for all of us. You've been so brave and understanding." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Sarah spoke again. "Hey, Dad? Do you think maybe you could teach me how to do makeup sometime? I mean, yours always looks so good now." Tim laughed, pressing a kiss to the top of Sarah's head. "I would love nothing more, sweetheart." As Tim left the room, Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Things were different now, yes, but in all the ways that truly mattered, their family was stronger than ever. The next few months brought a flurry of changes to the household. Tim fully embraced his role as a homemaker, throwing himself into cooking, cleaning, and various DIY projects with unbridled enthusiasm. One Saturday morning, Sarah stumbled downstairs to find the kitchen transformed. The cabinets had been repainted a cheery yellow, new curtains hung at the windows, and the air was thick with the scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls. Tim stood at the stove, humming to himself as he flipped pancakes. He wore a frilly apron over a vintage-style dress, his wig styled in soft waves. "Morning, sleepyhead," Tim chirped as Sarah slumped into a chair. "Hungry?" Sarah blinked, still trying to process the kitchen's makeover. Yeah. Did you do all this last night?" Tim grinned,
sliding a stack of pancakes onto a plate. Couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd get an early start. What do you think? Wow. Sarah accepted the plate, drowning the pancakes in syrup. You've been busy. Tim beamed, clearly pleased with himself. Just wait until you see what I have planned for the living room. As they ate, Tim chattered excitedly about his ideas for redecorating the entire house. Sarah found herself swept up in his enthusiasm, offering suggestions and even volunteering to help paint. Linda joined them a short while later, looking amused but not entirely surprised by the kitchen's transformation. I see the nesting instinct has kicked in full force, she teased, kissing Tim on the cheek. Tim blushed, swatting her playfully with a dish towel. Oh, hush you. You love it. I do, Linda agreed, her eyes soft. It suits you. As the weeks passed, Tim's confidence in his new identity continued to grow. He started venturing out in public dressed as a woman, first just for quick errands, then for longer outings. Sarah found herself oddly protective of her father during these trips. She'd glare at anyone who stared too long or whispered behind their hands. More often than not, though, people barely gave them a second glance. One afternoon, as they browsed the aisles of a department store, Sarah realized something had changed. She no longer saw her father in a dress. She saw a woman who happened to be her parent. Hey, Sarah said, nudging Tim with her elbow. I think I'm ready. Tim looked up from the rack of blouses she'd been examining. Ready for what, honey? Sarah took a deep breath. To call you Mom, if that's okay? Tim's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Sarah into a fierce hug, not caring who might see. Oh, sweetheart, that's more than okay. That's everything. As they pulled apart, both wiping their eyes and laughing a little, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This was their new normal, and it was beautiful. The true test came a few weeks later when Jake, Sarah's older brother, came home from college for summer break. They'd told him about Tim's transition over video calls, but seeing it in person was a different matter entirely. Jake stood frozen in the entryway, staring at Tim with wide eyes. Tim fidgeted nervously with the hem of her sundress, a tentative smile on her lips. Hi, honey, she said softly. Welcome home. Jake blinked rapidly, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Hey, Mom. The tension in the room dissipated as Tim's face lit up with joy. She opened her arms, and Jake stepped into them without hesitation. Sarah watched from the stairs, her heart swelling with love for her unconventional but fiercely devoted family. It hadn't been an easy journey, but standing there, watching her brother and her mother embrace, she knew it had all been worth it. As the summer progressed, their home became a haven of acceptance and love. Tim's joy in her new role was infectious, spreading to every corner of their lives. Family game nights became a regular occurrence, filled with laughter and playful banter. Tim's cooking skills improved by leaps and bounds, and soon their kitchen was the go-to spot for neighborhood potlucks and impromptu gatherings. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Sarah found Tim in the backyard, tending to a newly planted flower garden. She plopped down on the grass beside her, watching as Tim carefully pruned a rose bush. You know, Sarah mused, I never thought I'd see the day when you'd voluntarily do yard work. Tim chuckled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. Neither did I, to be honest. But there's something so satisfying about nurturing these little plants, watching them grow and bloom. Sarah nodded, plucking a blade of grass and twirling it between her fingers. Kind of like our family, huh? Tim paused, looking at her daughter with misty eyes. That's a beautiful way to put it, sweetheart. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Tim working steadily while Sarah basked in the warm sunlight. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "Hey, Mom." I'm really proud of you. You know that, right?" Tim set down her pruning shears, turning to face Sarah fully. "Oh, honey, that means more to me than you could ever know." Sarah leaned her head on Tim's shoulder. "I'm glad you found yourself, even if it took a while." Tim wrapped an arm around her daughter, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the backyard, Linda called them in for dinner. They made their way inside, Tim's arm still draped over Sarah's shoulders. The kitchen was warm and inviting, filled with the aroma of Tim's latest culinary creation. Jake was already at the table, setting out plates and cutlery. Linda stood at the stove, putting the finishing touches on a colorful stir-fry. As they settled around the table, passing dishes and sharing stories from their day, Sarah looked around at her family. Her mother, radiant in her newfound authenticity. Her father, supportive and strong as ever. Her brother, who had embraced change with open arms. And herself, no longer the confused, scared girl who had stumbled upon her father in a dress all those months ago. She had grown too, learning the true meaning of unconditional love and acceptance. This was their family, unconventional perhaps, but bound together by a love stronger than any label or expectation. As laughter filled the kitchen and the warm glow of contentment settled over them all, Sarah knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!